Hello and welcome back to Automotive Tales. This is a bit of an emergency video because something has changed in the fleet. So panic not, nothing has gone terribly wrong, but you'll probably be aware from the videos throughout this year that I've been selling the Rolls-Royce for probably 9-12 months now. Righto, finally time to get the Rolls out. So I'm going to use it for a black tie event tomorrow, and then next thing is it's going off to Starmans to have the exhaust looked at. So the exhaust is just catching somewhere on the undercarriage. Once it warms up, something expands somewhere. It's just rattling ever so slightly, which is somewhat annoying. And it's going to have a once over, go for an MOT, and then it will properly be up for sale. I know I've said a few times I am selling it. It is properly going up for sale. Okay, exciting times. It is Starman day, so I am just going to check the oil. I've just turned the power back on to the Duchess, and we are heading up to Nottingham to see Dwayne and Carl at Starman's. So the reason this is very exciting is getting the Duchess into Dwayne means we can sort some of the problems. First of all, the knocking exhaust, which it's sort of just doing a little bit of now already while the car's warming up, and getting it a fresh MOT, which can be very important because to sell this car as a 1981 car, it really should be tax exempt. And selling it as a not tax exempt car would be slightly silly. Not really trying very hard. I had actually got to the point of writing an advert for Evoke Classics, and apologies to Sarah Crabtree and her team. I'd sent over all the pictures and videos only for somebody to approach me and ask to buy the car from work. So what this means is, you guessed it, the Rolls-Royce is sold. In fact, it goes tomorrow morning. The guy came to look at it today. We shook hands on a price exactly the same as what I paid for the car in 2019 at £4,500. So I wanted to do a very quick look back while I still had all the stack of receipts from my time owning the car, which goes alongside the huge stack of receipts that are with the car from the previous owners right through to the very first owner, including the PDR sheet from when it left the factory with any blemishes it needed sorting before it was handed over at HRO in London back in 1981. So I wanted to do a very quick video to understand what it's cost to own a Rolls-Royce for 6 years. So I bought the car from an auction at Matthewson's back in February of 2019 for the princely sum of £4,500, which is not bad for an MOT'd and fully running Rolls-Royce, as somebody else is about to have exactly the same pleasure. So after I paid some taxes on that and I'd paid for the delivery on it, I was at about £5,000, but I'm going to work on the £4,500 it cost me to buy the car. I then had to relatively quickly send it in for some repairs. So the first repair was to fix the height control valve because the car had a bit of a gangster lean and just needed the control valve to be fixed, and all of a sudden leveled itself out. It also needed 2 new tyres and an exhaust mounting, and that was in July of 2019 after we'd come back from the 24 hours of Le Mans, which was what the car was bought for. And that cost me the princely sum of £1,200. So for around £6,000, I've had the car and had my first year of use out of it. Then we get to March 2020. Ironically, the car delivered just before we went into lockdown from a few items it needed. So in March 2020, we did a service on the car. We fitted the full stainless steel exhaust. I did lower ball joints on the front suspension, replaced all the boots and gaiters on the other ball joints around the top ball joints on the suspension, rebuilt the front hubs, and replaced the subframe damper, which is An odd thing with the Rolls-Royce, the rear axle is actually allowed to move forward and backwards on its mounting to smooth out acceleration and braking, and there's a little damper on that to stop it moving too aggressively, and one of those was squeaking and making an annoying noise, so that was replaced. So in March 2020, that cost me £2,365. Clearly, during 2020, the car didn't get used a great deal. I did actually manage to take it to work once or twice because I still had to go into the office at certain times during lockdown because of the type of work I do. And come March 2021, we had to have some more work done. So this time it needed new diff seals. We get a bit of a leak from the diff, so all the seals were done on that. We replaced a fan belt that had worn out. And a reverse switch in the gearbox. So I had this problem with the reverse light always being on, which we resolved by pulling the reverse light bulb out, which isn't really a proper fix. So Starman dove into the gearbox, found the switch was faulty, replaced that, and put an MOT on it. That was £1,020 in March 2021.
Move John's lemon dribble case out of the way.
Look at that tiny little sod. That's all the problem was.
Yeah.
And that was so it was just stuck in permanently showing reverse.
Yeah, but it's freed off now.
So it didn't even replace.
It's start working now, so I've put a new one in anyway.
Amazing.
It wasn't worth risking it.
Well, thank you for that.
That's all right, mate.
I guess the important thing is now I need to go and settle up. And then through 2021, we didn't do an awful lot of mileage, but we did have a year's trouble-free motoring out of the Rolls-Royce, which brings me to March 2022. MOT time again, where the car needed a new voltage regulator. We were having some running issues in terms of charging the battery, which we'll get to further down the line as we eventually resolve the problem. And then it had an overall check and went in for its MOT, and it passed. Now, there is another bit of work that was done in between, which I don't have an invoice for because Dwayne didn't charge me for it, which was to replace the alternator. We thought it was the charge regulator that failed. It turned out to actually be the alternator, so he fitted an alternator for me later on in 2022. I think it was about April or May time, because we were still having a bit of a running issue where the voltage was all over the place. The interior lights would go up and down with the revs. Something wasn't quite right. And that seemed to fix the problem. So come October 2022, we had to do some more work to the car. We'd had a good summer's worth of use out of it. So in October, we did both rear wheel bearings, that's a mouthful, an oil and grease service. So there's lots of grease points on the car that need to be greased over time to make sure nothing squeaks and everything moves as it should, generally suspension components. Replace a wiper arm. We had a bit of a problem with one of the wiper arms. We had a new gas spring on both left and right of the rear. So that's the Citroen-based system, the spheres basically that that support the rear end and bring the rear end up and down. They were just not working very well. We noticed that the pump was running quite a lot, and it was getting quite hard on the rear end and quite crashy. And that's as a result basically of the sphere failing and the whole thing getting fluid wedged, so there isn't the air spring within it to make that work. So we replaced a pair of those. Okay, nerdy fact of the day. The Citroen hydropneumatic suspension system we're talking about wasn't just licensed by Rolls-Royce to use on the Silver Shadow 2 and the Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit. It was also licensed by Maserati for the Quattroporte 2, by Peugeot for a couple of different vehicles, by Mercedes-Benz. It was also used by BMW on the E34 Touring, and it was used by Toyota for the active body control on the Toyota Sora. But most interestingly, it was used on the Challenger 2 tank. It needed a new battery because we're still having some charging problems, and fix a bit of broken windscreen trim. So around the windscreen there's a nice bit of chrome trim that holds the rubber and then the glass in. It's an old coach style rubber inserted glass, and part of that come away and started flapping, and it just basically is a new clip that's needed on the inside, and it's pulled through into the inside of the car, wrapped up, and then the trim goes over. So that was fixed. That cost me £1,400 in October 2022. The car then went away for a period of time. There is another missing invoice from when it was in storage, and Karim, the excellent mechanic that is based at Henry's Car Barn, did a few bits and pieces to get it through its MOT in between in 2024, because it was off the road in 23. So that was sort of £300 or £400. And then we get to the more recent video. So you've seen in April, well, it was in March, we had quite an undignified way to end the evening. A failure to proceed. for the very first time on the Rolls-Royce, and this was down to the buzz bar in the ignition. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in the video about a buzz bar. Well, that is what this little thing is here. So this links a couple of the terminals on the back of the switch, and it's obviously protected with this sort of plastic coating, etc. And this looks like one nice solid piece, but this isn't actually the one off the car. Dwayne is busy getting it off the switch right now, but he brought this as an example. What happens is it splits inside. So when it's pushed up against the other half of the buzz bar in there, it will allow you to bring ignition power on, but as soon as you put any sort of juice through that, it jumps ever so slightly and just air gaps. And these fail over time just with getting hot and cold. And that is almost certainly the problem. So, well, we're hoping that's the problem. So we're just going to get the one off the current switch, and hopefully we just need to order one of those or create a new cable to work as a buzz bar on the back of the switch. Can you believe it? That might be the root of all the problems we've been having with the failure to proceed. Amazing, isn't it? And you can see from the size of man, I mean, it's a tiny little thing. Unbelievable. Right, fingers crossed that's the problem. Which actually, I think, was the root cause of all of the charging problems we had, is that it wasn't connecting very well and we were getting some charging issues. And maybe the way around, maybe the charging issues had led to overloading the buzz bar and that failure of the little piece of brass. Either way, that had to be fixed. There was a call-out fee because the car was immovable. We also did a rear number plate light, which had failed, ready for its MOT. And some minor corrosion repair underneath the car and some of the suspension components, and then protect all of that with some underseal once it'd been repaired. Fix the exhaust. The exhaust had started knocking slightly. The stainless steel exhaust we fitted way back in 2020, so that just needed a mount adjusting so it didn't tap against the chassis, which was quite annoying. And an overall check and MOT, that cost me just £758, which is not bad for all the work that Dwayne and Kyle had done on the car. And that brings me up to today. Now, there is another bill that I haven't got the invoice for here, which was when I put 2 further new tyres on the car when I had the flat back in, I think it's November last year. Well, would you believe that? For all that effort, it's only flat on the bottom. What a waste. Which, again, was a couple of £100. I've got battery. So, a total of £12,000. I've sold the car for exactly what I paid for it, the £4,500, meaning it has cost me £7,500, give or take, to own this car and run the car, obviously not including fuel and all the other costs like road tax and insurance. So what does that break down to then? So let's take it yearly, so that's about £1,200 a year to own a Rolls-Royce. It doesn't actually feel that bad. And if we break that down monthly and compare it to a monthly car payment, so you might go out and buy an entry-level Volvo or a sort of mid-range Ford, and you might be paying £600, £700, £800 a month on your hire purchase, your lease scheme, whatever that might be, to own that vehicle before you put fuel in it, insure it, tax it, etc. Whereas the Rolls-Royce has cost me £100 a month. Now, that's a lot of money for a car I didn't do a lot of miles in, and it's a lot of money to have a large ornament sitting on the driveway because, well, that's what it did most of the time, but I did have a lot of fun with it, as you've seen in all the videos we've done on the channel with the Rolls-Royce, and actually, the Rolls-Royce is responsible for my single most important video, cold starting a Rolls-Royce. Fuel pressure. So I'll put a link to that video up here. By the time this goes live, it will probably have crossed the 100,000 views mark. Unfortunately, most of those views happened before I was monetized, so I haven't made the benefit of that. But it would appear lots of people like watching videos of big old Rolls-Royces being turned over in the very cold weather to start the car. So that is all really for this video. I just wanted to do a quick sort of rundown of what it actually costs to own this car, which has, let's be honest, been an awful lot of fun. There are much more expensive things you can do for a lot less fun. So I'm going to pack away this, well, not insignificant pile of invoices back in with all the invoices that previous owners have kept, gather together the keys, because there's 2 keys for the car, and in the morning, I will very sadly be signing the V5 over to a new owner. The Duchess is moving on. Sad times indeed. However, the new owner is an employee of Rolls-Royce PLC, which is quite interesting, and lives not that far away from us. So I'm hoping we will still see the car around and about, and it's probably going to be loved much as it has in our ownership with it. And I wish the new owner Christopher all the best of luck. Hopefully it continues to provide excellent service as it has to us. As I say, we've only had a failure to proceed once in the car, which turned out to be a very minor issue. So thank you for watching. It's all for this episode of Automotive Tales. We'll catch you next time when we no longer have a Rolls-Royce in the fleet, which is a very sad state of affairs. But we should probably go and get the Bentley out at least. There are worse problems in the world. It's a very first world problem. I no longer own a Rolls-Royce, but I do still have a Bentley. Right, that's all for me. Bye for now. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. So you can probably hear the Duchess ticking along the background, and that's because she's on her way out. She's sold, she's going, and the new owner is about to drive away. Home, James. Don't spare the horses.